It's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the Tuesday, December 17th council meeting to order. Mayor Ditzler, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Lees, would you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Boyce? Mr. Hampton?
Here.
Mr. Jensen?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Ms. Wiles? Here. Mr. Ayers?
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes for the December 3rd, 2019 meeting.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 8-0. Petitions or comments by citizens are present. I have one regarding a zoning change for 53-12-19. Would you like to wait till that project comes in, Mr. Ayers, or? Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, approval of agenda. I skipped over something here. Mr. Hampton.
Mr. President, I move to amend the agenda to add miscellaneous number 3, council to consider resolution RC-20-19, a resolution in lieu of transfer number TC-0119 to reallocate local income tax revenue from the general fund to the motor vehicle highway fund to cover costs associated with Pleasant Street design phase 1.
And are you moving it?
Moving to
Moving
amend
to
the
amend
agenda.
the agenda.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to add to the agenda miscellaneous number 3. Council consider resolution RC-20-19, a resolution in lieu of transfer number TC-01-19 to reallocate local income tax revenue from the general fund to the motor vehicle highway fund to cover costs associated with Pleasant Street design phase 1. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries to amend the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
As amended.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 8-0. Mayor's report to council. Mr. Mayor.
Members of council, Mr. President, I do not have anything in writing. Our suite is being painted, number one, and Michelle's been out. If I did have it, I couldn't find it. I was, however, going through my calendar since the last meeting, and it's very slim. I had a couple pizza parties with the elementary kids, and we did give away checks from the charity ball. And other than that, other than my normal keeping people safe, and want to congratulate certainly the street department on the snow, other than that, I have no report. I would like to comment. I think people do know that this is my last council meeting in 16 years. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve with you as mayor of this fine city. So with that, are there any questions of me? I always end that way.
I'd like to add to your report just because you did such a good job in our Parks Department. Our downtown committee did such a good job on Seminary Park. You cut the ribbon, and
thank you.
And it's beautiful with this snow
that was
right
on my
now.
calendar too, but it was. I think the Seminary Park is really, everyone did a great job. It was a nice event, very much so. Thank you for reminding me of that.
I just think everybody needs to drive by with this snow because it's really pretty.
I totally agree.
Or walk it. I saw several people doing a nice walking through. So.
Yeah, I did hear from three people, there were, a lot of kids there. More activity since we've done it maybe in the last few years even. So that's great.
That's wonderful.
It's a great park.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and we will miss your I have a little house housekeeping that the council would like to do. And I don't know if the whole council wants to come down to do this or not, but I have
I think
some
that's yes.
people I would like to recognize. Starting with Mr. Jowett, Chief Jowett. If you could come up, please. Chief Jowett, I can almost stand here and be on. The Noblesville City Council would like to recognize you for your service to the community and all the things that you've done to help protect our community. I've known you a long time, well past before your time as police chief, but we appreciate your service and look forward to your next venture, wherever that may be. And it's not going to be motorcycles, you told me. So. No. So I'd like to present you with this and thank you for your service to our community. Confound on that a little bit, or everybody good with what I had to say?
It's been a privilege to serve. Thank you all so much for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our fire chief, Greg Wyatt, cannot be here this evening. He's sitting on a fire. He had a daughter's car that broke down at college. We wanted to get her back for Christmas holiday. So we will be presenting Mr. Wyatt, or Chief Wyatt, with an appreciation plaque. Ms. Johnson, I need help because you've done so much. Under your leadership, you've run the economic department well. You've brought a lot of new business to our community. Exit 10 has flourished with your help. And the City Council greatly appreciates your time and service here. And I know you're looking forward to warmer weather and sunshine, especially this time of year. But thank you. Mr. Cook? You also did write some things. I don't know how Robert kind of helped me out a little bit, but with your help, we have lots of new projects going in. The Seminary Park, you kind of led the charge on, but you and several other committees of the Parks Department administration have done a great job with that. The Levinson project, I'm glad you've kept up on it. You helped the downtown merchants coincide, and you have many other projects, but we greatly appreciate your help and leadership.
Yeah, we won't be going anywhere, and I appreciate all you guys have done. Obviously, administration can't do the work that we do without council support, and hopefully I haven't caused too much heartburn over the last 4 years, but we've done a lot together, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And Mayor Ditzler, I'm going to let y'all put that. I have a hard time, we produced a plaque because it's hard after you had the ballroom named after you. I noticed the last meeting we came in at the same time, and I'm gonna go ahead and try 4 more. I don't know if that's right or not, but I appreciate your leadership the last 16 years. You have made Noblesville a better community and a safer and stronger community. I can't name all the projects. I started 2 down at the embassy one day, and I got cut off. So anyway, I appreciate your help and thank you for your leadership. And I know we're going to continue to see you at City Hall.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Would the 4 of you come back up for just a minute? We'll do a picture.
Where would you?
Yeah, I think we'll probably be fine. Yeah, just tighten up a little bit. What do you want us, Robert?
We have almost 2 rows too, so if you guys want to be a chief in a little bit.
All right. I'll go in the end, that way we.
I won't take that. Again. All right. One,
Pizza.
2, 3. One, 2, 3. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
It's my game.
A lot of years of service with the 5 gentlemen that we mentioned, and
And lady.
and ladies, I'm sorry. See why I had to have Robert kind of help me out. So, and we do greatly appreciate the effort, energy, and time that was put in. With that, council committee reports.
Mr. President,
Mr. Jensen.
the Roads Committee met on Friday, December 6th. A long agenda, and I know we have a lot to go through tonight, so just a few key areas that I'd like to point out. Pleasant Street, which is a huge project and a priority for this council and others going forward. The design is ongoing. We applied for a federal aid grant, which was submitted actually last week, and we should expect some word back on that hopefully in February, with final grant dollars awarded in May. That'll be key to our future there. State Road 37, which impacts a lot of us here in the community. A few key highlights: drainage lines. They're working on the drainage lines currently, which is expected to be completed in April of 2020. 146th Street, which is a Noblesville interchange, will let in February of this coming year. And 141st Street, which is the other Noblesville interchange, is scheduled for October of 2021. Logan Street pedestrian bridge, which we all hear quite a bit about, and just so everyone knows, the road is expected to open with no restrictions by December 20th, which is very exciting. And the ribbon cutting is set for January 6th at 4 p.m. That is a project jointly with our friends over at the county. And final point, I will just highlight on an ongoing project down the road, the Kerrigan Road, in honor of Mr. Johnson, that's me, the Kerrigan Road Bridge will be rehabbed here before too long, and it's going to coincide, it will be closed over the summer break of 2020. So I know that involves Mr. Johnson constituents, and that's something that he's passionate about, I know.
Yeah.
So I wanted to end on that note.
Good deal. Thank you.
And any other highlights can be found in the Roads Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Any other committee reports?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
the Finance Committee met December 12th. I will hit a few of the highlights. A few of the items on our agenda this evening came forward from this meeting. One highlight, the high AV growth levy appeal was approved by the DLGF, which amounts to $524,000 per year of additional property tax levy, which we're going to need for ongoing infrastructure and normal operations. So that was a positive thing. The one-year bond that we contemplated as part of the budget that was sent out for bids, and the interest rate including fees was 1.71%. So credit to the administration, the council, past councils for ensuring that the balance sheet of the city is strong, and so we're able to garner those kinds of rates in the marketplace. And this bond will be closed on or before the end of the year. I don't know which date exactly this will close, but sometime yet this month. Mr. Barris will address some of the transfers that are on the agenda. And then there's one other agenda item on here regarding the transfer of funding to the MVH fund, so I will not go into that in detail. We have the encumbrances were discussed. I think one of the things that Mr. Spalding's planning on doing next year is to try to come up with a, I guess I'll say, more of a process to try to make sure that we're staying on top of potential encumbrances through the year, and will likely be bringing, at least semi-annually, maybe quarterly reports on what is actually going to be encumbered based on contracts that are approved by the Board of Works. So we'll know as we go through the year how many of those dollars are actually committed for those contracts. So he's working on that structure as we speak here. And we have had some conversations with Westfield, Carmel, Fishers about lit allocation. As we all know, that's near and dear to our hearts. And there's been no conclusions or recommendations made at this point, but I think that it's something that is being discussed because it makes a significant difference for communities on where those dollars are actually distributed. It's, as you know, it's a county tax, so not only does it affect the 4 municipalities I just mentioned, but you've got Arcadia, Sheridan, et cetera, Cicero. But those conversations are ongoing. Nothing definitive has come forward yet, but with the General Assembly starting in January, if something were to happen there, it's going to have to be introduced sometime down in the State House. So other than that, we didn't have a quorum, so the claims did not come with a recommendation to the council.
Any other committee reports? With that, we'll move on to claims.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved to approve the claims. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 8-0. Now on to other business. Previously discussed ordinances. Council can consider ordinance 50-11-19, an ordinance approving additional appropriation from the Downtown Development Fund for light refurbishing in downtown Noblesville. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and again, this is the second reading on a additional appropriation ordinance that we discussed now a while back just because of the timing around the holidays for council meetings. But it's fairly simple and straightforward issue that was discussed at that last meeting and really is around the notion of a typical thing we've been doing recently is to just get the appropriations in alignment with the right funds and the proper budget to cover the various obligations of the city.
Any questions of Mr. Spalding? With that, I move to open the public hearing for ordinance 50-11-19.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
seeing no one from the public come forward, I would move that we close the public hearing for ordinance 50-11-19.
It's been moved to close the public hearing for ordinance 50-11-19. I'm sorry. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. Hearing is closed. With that, do I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles.
I would move that we approve ordinance number 50-11-19 as presented.
Second.
Been moved to approve ordinance 50-11-19. That would be a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Air?
Aye.
8-0, the ordinance is adopted.
Council to consider ordinance 52-12-19, an ordinance amending ordinance number 1381 and number 100304 in section 34.08 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Noblesville concerning fees and policies for Riverside Cemetery. Ms. Lees?
This ordinance is second reading. It was presented to you. We're just updating the fees and codifying procedures at the cemetery. It was approved by the Board of Works at their last meeting 2 weeks ago. They are the trustees of the cemetery, and I welcome any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Lees?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
just as a reminder, the last time that these fees were changed was 2004, so I think it's appropriate that we make these adjustments at this time. And with that, then I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance number 53-12-19 as presented.
Second that?
No,
52.
5212.
Second that?
It's been moved to approve ordinance 52-12-19 and seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
8-0, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you.
Moving on, council to consider ordinance 53-12-19, an ordinance for a change of zoning from R1 and FH to R2 and FH for approximately 21.84 acres of property located at 11002 East 166th Street in Noblesville Township. Ms. Ashelman?
The next one also.
Okay, we'll read the two of them together. Council consider ordinance 54-12-19, an ordinance for a change of zoning from R2 and FH to R2-FH/PD and adoption of a preliminary development plan for the approximately 21.84 acres of property located at 11002 East 166th Street in Noblesville Township. Ms. Ashelman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Apparently, we're winging it today. Oh, it decides to work now. I really don't have a whole lot to add from last week, or the last meeting, other than Mr. Ayers brought up a concern with a limitation on the number of ranch homes to be constructed in the subdivision. The petitioner has amended Section 5 of their PD ordinance, which I believe is on page 3 of that PD ordinance, to include the provision that states that no more than 6 of that particular model, I can't remember it off the top of my head, Shelbourne, will be built in that subdivision. Just a reminder, it's 26 lots, or 27 lots total, and it's this, in general, the same petition you saw a year ago, except for they have added the passing blister on 166th Street.
Any questions of Ms. Ashelman? We do have a member of the community that would like to speak. Mr. Ayers? Spelled a little different than mine. Could you state your name and address, please?
Sure, we take you on as a relative, though. John Ayers, I live at 16333 Valhalla Drive, which is in Sagamore Edition, directly across from 166th Street. And so I apologize, I got my information on this from today's edition of The Current, which I assume appropriately reported your last meeting. And I just have a couple concerns as a neighbor I'd like to raise, and that is that, number one, this area with the flood hazard area, it's difficult for me to understand why, or the reason that this would need to be redesignated at this point. I think that the people, the entities that benefit are going to be the developer and the builder, and the folks at risk are the ones that are going to purchase one of these homes that could be abutted to that. And I don't really think that we have a compelling reason to try to designate by way of an ordinance something that's already been identified by FEMA as a potential risk. The second thing has to do with the change in the zoning from low density to medium density. And as I understand it from the paper, this is a reduction in the square footage of the homes from 3,000 to 1,800. That's 40%. As a homeowner in an adjacent community, I do get concerned about the density of homes around us and what that can do to our values, but also as a taxpayer, I'm concerned about the property taxes that are going to be reduced as a result of this change. We're living in an era that, thanks to our elected state representatives and a cap on taxes, that we're moving from tax-based services to fee-based services. We've seen that with the trash collection. I have a bill that I receive every month from the water company for a fire hydrant maintenance fee. I have a 911 fee. And we can't, I think we need to really look at the potential reduction in the tax revenue and understand if that's really been evaluated relative to this. So I think this was, as I understand it, this area was approved previously for custom homes, 3,000 square feet. Now we're going to go to non-custom, pre-existing floor plan homes. And I don't, see that if we've approved something from a council standpoint some time ago, a reason to change this, quite frankly. That just because someone comes in and says, this would really be nice if I could build a smaller home here and make my money as a national builder and get out of town, as a resident here for 15 years. And by the way, Mayor, thank you. I've lived here the whole time that you've served, and you've done a great job and provided forums where we can come up and give our opinions. But I would at least ask the council to ruminate over that a little bit and ask themselves, what's the burning bridge here now that this needs to happen? And how many more times will this happen such that really where we're generating our tax base on, it's not coming from a lot of businesses given the number of economic incentives we're giving. And we really need to pay attention to the homeowner taxpayer. Thanks.
Thanks.
Would you like to address any of those issues or the petitioner?
I will address specifically the floodplain question. I don't know if many of you know, I am the certified floodplain manager on staff. It's actually one of my professional certifications. The county and the city in general have very strict regulations about filling within the floodplain. You can't just come in and put a cubic yard of fill and take a cubic yard of fill from somewhere else. At a minimum, you are required to do 3-to-1 compensatory storage. So for every cubic yard of fill that you place, you have to take 3 cubic yards out somewhere, generally on the parcel that you are filling in. The petitioner, the number seems like a lot. It's an acre and a half that they are filling. It essentially is only getting them these 4 lots. And 16, 17, 18, and 19. It cuts the corners on 16 and 19. And 17 and 18 are fully within the floodplain. I believe the petitioner still, as part of their process, has to go to the drainage board and get a variance to even allow that to happen too, because that section of Stony Creek is also a regulated drain. So you're the first set of eyes. They've got another set of eyes in the county surveyor's office and the drainage board that they have to go through as well. And they are looking to do that. Mr. Ayer mentioned 3,000 square feet in a previously approved project. The previous planned development, they proposed a 3,200 square foot minimum house size. You did not actually approve that project. The petitioner withdrew the project before it got a vote last year. It got to the same reading last year and it was pulled by the petitioner at that time. So nothing was actually approved.
I don't know if you can address this or the petitioner, but there are 8 set of plans with 27 different elevations. At least that's what I'm counting. One of those is a ranch home plan with 3 different elevations, which is limited to 6 lots out of the
Correct.
27 lots. Is that what we have?
27, yes.
Do we know what the average square footage of the other, they're all 2 stories, they're all.
I'll have to
they're
let
all-
the petitioner
yeah,
address that.
Maybe they can help us address,
Yeah.
because I think truly what we're looking at is the quality of home and property and price points. I mean, that's what generates our tax revenues, the valuations.
I'm going to have to let them address that.
Figured you would.
Andy Worth, Church Hill in the interim, offices 2 North Ninth Street here in Noblesville. I'm also here with Dawn Barnett from Drees Homes. I'm going to have her answer the questions specifically on the different models and the square footage, if that's what your question is.
Yes, that is, because I think the price points we were talked about in ARB previously and the square footage were much higher, and that's why we limited the one ranch home down to a specific number in order to not, I guess, create a whole neighborhood of that smaller home.
Right, and that minimum house size in the ordinance was intended to be the minimum, not necessarily average, but
Right.
Our price point really hasn't changed a lot. It's still in the 350,000 range.
On average, or,
Dawn?
I can
I can say,
Hi, my name's Dawn Barnett with Drees Homes. Address is 900 East 96th Street, Suite 100, Indianapolis, Indiana 46240. I am the land acquisition manager for Drees Homes. Our minimum square footage on the ranch is 1,800 square feet, and our 2 stories range from 2,700 square feet to 3,300 square feet. All of these homes are projected to be on basements, and all are projected to have a 3-car front load or a 3-car side load. The price point of these homes are going to be $375,000 to $500,000.
anybody have any questions of Ms. Barnett or Mr. Wirt?
Mr. President, is it 6 of the ranch homes?
6 is the maximum.
Is what's been reduced to?
Allowed, yes.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr.
didn't we
Taylor.
cut these, I say we, didn't this project cut the number of homes
What was
compared to
original?
was last time?
I can't answer you.
No, it's an exact, it
was
was
at
27 last year.
Okay.
Mr. President.
Mr. Jensen.
Mr. Wirt, last time, I think one of the biggest issues we had, and this may be obvious, was a passing blister on 166th Street. Obviously, infrastructure out there is key as we continue to grow. Ms. Wiles can talk about that in terms of her district, but has that been added to this project, the passing
It
blister?
has, yes.
Okay. I know that was probably the biggest hangup we had as a council last time, looking at pedestrian safety and traffic safety as well. So.
We believe the right-of-way is out there, and we've been in contact with Duke Energy on some of those details.
Okay.
That's one of the first things that'll go in fact.
Great, thank you so much.
President.
Ms. Wiles.
Mr. Wirt, I'm looking at this drawing, it looks that there's a passing blister on the north side of 166. Is there also a passing blister on the south side?
Well, so you've got accel-decel lanes approaching the entrance on the north side, and the passing blister would be on the south side, opposite the entrance.
So on both sides, you're going to have a.
You'll have that
Yeah,
space.
right. Mr. Ayers, did that make anything any clearer or help anything?
I understand your position.
Correct, I just wanted to make sure that at least something was cleared up a little bit from what you read in the current.
Comment would be that we're going from the issue that was withdrawn apparently.
Would you come up here, please? I'm sorry.
So what was withdrawn last year was a minimum of 3,200 square feet, and now what I hear is that that's going to be effectively the maximum. And if that's okay, if we feel that that's a good price point and are happy with the Drees Homes and the work that they've done in Indianapolis, I do have some personal hesitancy, having been caught in a situation from 2004 5 or 8 or whatever when everything started going south, and I ended up having to invest a substantial amount of money in my home that was already figuratively underwater. These could be literally underwater, I think, and I'm not a floodplain expert, but the people from FEMA, I think, who did this probably are. And, yeah, you can move all the dirt around if you want, but if you've ever seen water, water wins over dirt every time. Fly over Missouri and see all the places that were underwater from the Mississippi. So it just gives me a little hesitancy. I hate to see that foisted on new neighbors. If it happens, I hope it doesn't, but we've hit 100-year floodplains here, in Indiana twice in the past 10 years. So I just think we need to, I would go with caution on that, but I'm not in charge of the world. Thanks, Brian, for the opportunity.
And would you mind just, if you wouldn't mind taking this is public record. It will give you a little bit more than what you read in the current as far as information goes. Yeah.
Not that the current didn't provide great information.
Right,
Mr. President, just real quickly, based on what I'm hearing, is homes 17 and 18, are they the two that are in the floodplain?
Those are the two that are currently completely in the floodplain, I believe.
Is there any notion to eliminate those two?
President, may I speak?
Mr. Howard.
I also represent the Drainage Board, so I have a little. When we say it's in the floodplain, those lots are in the current floodplain. There is fill going in to raise those base elevations above the 100-year flood. For every yard that's used to fill to get, those houses cannot be built below the 100-year flood line, or we lose our FEMA flood insurance
Well, and I
protection.
can also add to
That's what
that.
you said.
Our standard is actually not just to raise it above the 100-year flood elevation.
2 feet.
It has to be 2 feet above
Right.
the 100-year flood elevation. So if the existing FEMA floodplain flood elevation is 757, the lot has to be at least 759 or up before it meets the state of Indiana regulations. So the state of Indiana is actually much more restrictive than a lot of other states, and we actually exceed a lot of the National Flood Insurance Program
You
requirements.
were gonna state how much fill
So the
how much you had to
the
replace.
last point is, for every cubic yard of dirt you place in fill above the existing 100-year flood to get it out, you must mitigate by digging out 3 cubic feet within the same area or watershed so that the compensatory storage is better than the existing condition. So it's not like they're building houses in the floodplain.
Just the current floodplain, I get that.
Yeah, and this is, just for your reference, this dash line here is the existing flood plain line. The darker one is the floodway. Are your,
They're not on, but that's all right.
Yeah. Pushing buttons there.
I'll help you out.
I usually just come out there and sit when you don't have mine on.
And I might add, and Denise
Mr.
mentioned that
President.
there's a variance procedure we're going through with the Drainage Board. That is really more of a technical review, because what happens at that meeting, or prior to that meeting, actually, is the construction plans are submitted for review by Christopher Burke Engineering. They will be looking at that to make sure that the fill is actually compacted to the correct compaction rate, and that there is, in fact, a 3-to-1 volume being compensated here.
I will say that we probably have one of the toughest county surveyors regarding floodplain and flood fill of any county in the state. Mr. Johnson.
Maybe this is for Denise, I'm not sure. Knowing that when you build a home like this and you get insurance, if you're building in a flood zone, they're not even going to insure your home.
Actually, that's not true.
They will, but
They
it'll cost.
They will insure them. So there are 2 different flood policies. There's the flood policy if you're in a floodplain, and then there is what they call the preferred risk policy. Sorry, I'm proving I know way too much about this stuff.
That's okay.
Preferred risk means that you're not in a mapped floodplain, which after they remove these lots, which they'll be required to do some paperwork with FEMA to get that done, they qualify for the preferred risk. even if they don't qualify for the preferred risk, we're currently moving to a flood insurance system that is, their premiums are based on the amount of feet they are above the current flood elevation. So we have homes in the south side that their foundations are 4 feet below the 100-year flood elevation. Their rate's going to be a lot different than the house next to them that's elevated on a
Higher.
brick wall, and and they're next door to each other. But, so that's how their premiums are. As long as you live in a community that participates in the National Flood Insurance Program.
That's my question,
You are
yeah.
able to get flood insurance.
Yeah.
And we are actually a community rating system community, which means that we do stuff that's above and beyond the National Flood Insurance Program, and we qualify for discounts. So we're currently a Class 7 community. All our residents qualify for a 10% discount on their flood insurance premiums based on our regulatory scheme.
That's the expertise I wanted to know.
Yes.
Any other Mr. Peterson?
I also say that in the Architecture Review Board, you take the number of units, options, times the number of options for a 27-lot subdivision. This will feel very much like a custom subdivision because there's so many options. And Dries was very good about working with us on the standards for the subdivision, improving, upgrading the lots along 166th Street. And I think it'll feel more like a custom neighborhood than it would a production neighborhood.
Any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
Ordinance 54-1219 will need to be amended by the council since it has been changed.
So we will do these one at a time. Have a motion?
Are we on 53 and 54 now?
53.
We need a motion.
We're on 53.
Okay. I make a motion to approve ordinance 53-12-19, ordinance for a change of zoning from R1 to FH to R2 and FH for approximately 21.84 acres for the property located at 1102 or 11002 East 166th Street in Noblesville Township.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Council to approve ordinance 53-12-19, ordinance for a change of zoning from R1 and FH to R2 and FH for approximately 21.84 acres for property located at 11002 East 166th Street in Noblesville Township. Ms. Lees, this will be a roll call vote.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Nay.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
7 aye, 1 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Council to consider ordinance 50.
Mr. President, I make a motion to amend number 54-12-19.
Second?
Been moved to amend ordinance 54-12-19, an ordinance for a change of zoning from R2 and FH to R2, FH/PD, and adoption of a preliminary development plan for approximately 21.84 acres for the property located at 11002 East 166th Street in Noblesville Township. Be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Do we have a motion? Somebody has to make that.
I'll make the motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve as amended. Ms. Lees, this will be a roll call vote.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles. Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. Ayers. 7 aye, 1 nay. The ordinance is adopted.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Council to consider ordinance 55-12-19.
I know.
An ordinance for a change of zoning from R1 to R1 PD and the adoption of a preliminary development plan for approximately 17.87 acres and located west of Little Chicago Road and south of 191st Street in the city of Noblesville. Ms. Yelton?
Good evening.
Evening.
Good evening.
As you may recall, this is a planned development overlay being proposed for the creation of 32 total lots with one existing home that will remain as a part of this overall development. So actually, there will be 31 new homes proposed as to be built upon. There are common areas. We do have a dry detention area that is along Little Chicago Road. They are required. They are doing buffering. They have maintained a lot of the trees that are currently on site. At our last meeting, there was some questions in regards to the right-of-way on 191st Street. My understanding is the engineering department has reached out to some of the council members and had a discussion, and I believe that all of the questions were answered. With that, it was sent to you with a favorable recommendation for adoption by the Plan Commission. And at this point, I will ask if you have any questions of staff.
Any questions of Ms. Yelton?
Mr. President, just a comment. Ms. Wiles and I attended the Roads Committee meeting, at which meeting we had a rather robust conversation with the city engineer on the right-of-way issues, and I think after having had that discussion and asking several questions, I think, at least from my chair, I was satisfied with what I heard from the city engineer with respect to future right-of-way concerns there, so, and access for this subdivision and what may be happening on the north side of this development in the future. So that conversation was had. Ms. Wiles may have some additional comments, but it was very thorough.
No comments from me. I would echo Mr. O'Connor's comments.
Any questions of
Mr. President?
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. O'Connor, did they say anything about timeline of redoing that road? I mean, because of all the traffic? I know that's a concern of mine, is we've talked about it, but we haven't done anything.
Yeah, are you talking about 191st Street?
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. President, I didn't mean to interrupt you. 191st Street has been obviously become a pretty good thoroughfare, and Mr. Hampton will attest to that as well. I believe it was resurfaced in 2019 or 2018, recently. And I think the idea was to partner with Westfield and the county to kind of redo that once construction is complete there. But it is on the thoroughfare plan, and the engineering department's well aware of that need going forward, because it is a main thoroughfare now out to 31.
Thank you.
But our section, I will say, is very nicely done. You can just tell when it stops off in other areas.
Mr. President, and just to comment on that, that thoroughfare is becoming more and more busy, and it is of a concern of mine, because we haven't even really started the conversations between the other entities, this other city, Westfield, and the county, about trying to fix this road. And there's a part of me that really struggles with continuing to put more development along it. My thought would be, let's fix the road then. And I know maybe that's not the way you want me to think.
You want to be proactive
I'd
versus
rather be
reactive?
proactive, but that's just my 2 cents on it. And I know this is only 32 homes, but at some point, I'd like to see those conversations get started between Westfield and the county and us to try to get 191st Street up to speed, so to speak. Pardon the pun.
I can echo that. I agree with that, but I will say that the conversation has started with the county and with Westfield, so that those are underway. So.
Any other questions for Ms. Yeldon or for the petitioner? I have a motion.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles,
I would make a motion that we approve ordinance number 55-12-19 as presented.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 55-12-19. This will be a roll call vote. Ms. Lees?
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Nay.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
7 aye, 1 nay, the ordinance is adopted.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have a proposed new development. Council consider introductory information for an amended preliminary development plan for a proposed age-restricted housing project located south of Harold Parkway and east of Cabela Parkway, a part of Saxony Corporate Campus Plan Development, CHS Noblesville Act, LLC. Joe McCallum? I'm sorry, I'm going to get that wrong.
It's McAwee.
McAwee, I'm sorry. Could you state your name and address for us, please?
Joseph F. McAwee, 115 Carnoustie Way, Media, Pennsylvania, 19063. That's my home address. The office address is 1275 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C., 20004. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for the opportunity tonight. Again, my name is Joe McElwee with Capital Seniors Housing. I am the principal in charge of development for Capital Seniors Housing. I'm here tonight with Mike Hartman, who's the principal for Capital Seniors Housing in the Active Living Division, and also with Brad Schrage from Structure Point, our civil engineer. I'd like to briefly introduce who Capital Seniors Housing is, turn the microphone over to Mike Hartman, who will tell everybody what active living is, and then Brad will walk you briefly through the site plan. CSH has been in business since 2003, and all we do is seniors housing. The founder of Capital Seniors Housing, Scott Stewart, and I met at Sunrise Senior Living, where I worked for 14 and a half years. And all we do, again, is seniors housing, and we do it in the top markets around the country, and we consider Noblesville to be one of those top markets. We have acquired and or developed in most of the major MSAs across the country, investing over $1.7 billion. I personally have been in the business for about 30 years, and I think Mike is probably about 20. We have developed well over 100 senior living communities from the ground up. So we're very experienced in who we hire to build, to develop, and to run our communities. We build a full spectrum of senior living: active living, independent living, assisted living, and memory care. The picture on the left that you see on this page just opened up about 6 months ago and has already won a national award for architecture, both interior and exterior. We have great capital partners. We're currently exclusive developers for Bain Capital and the Carlyle Group. So we're very well funded. We're not looking for money. We have the equity to do this deal, and we have the ability to get financing to do this deal. We also asset manage our own community, so there will be a third-party manager who runs this community, but the CSH asset managers will go to the community periodically to make sure it's being run properly and to our standards and to Noblesville standards. The next page. We have a national footprint. We currently own or operate about 44 communities. Some of the representative new developments are on the left side. We have communities that we own and operate in Seattle to LA to Boston to Chicago to Florida, etc. We currently have 25 communities that are new, and by that I mean they're either just recently opened, under construction, or in development. And then we own or operate another 19 existing communities that we acquired. In 2003, we kind of switched the gears at CSH and went from an acquisitions company to a development company. And we currently have 6 under construction, 6 in development, 4 in our pipeline, including a 180-unit active living community in Gwinnett, Georgia. And we have a 208-unit active living community in Cinnaminson, New Jersey called Sienna. What I'd like to do now is bring Mike Hartman up to tell everybody what our definition of active living is.
Thanks, Joe. Mike Hartman, thank you so much for having me here. I've been a commercial real estate professional my whole career.
Could you state your address, Mr. Hartman?
Of course. My home address is 1020 Lake Shore Drive. That's Alpharetta, Georgia, 30005. Same office address as Joe in Washington, D.C. And like I said, I've been a commercial real estate professional my whole career. The last 20 years exclusively on seniors housing, and then about 5 years ago, I started focusing on active living. Joe and I actually met at Sunrise about 20 years ago. Sunrise is a large company that does assisted living and memory care. Active living, 55 plus, age-restricted housing, senior apartments, they're all the same thing. It's just a different word. Active living is what we call purpose-built, age-restricted housing that doesn't offer care, and it doesn't bundle in food, housekeeping, transportation into the rent. So what it is, it's a value-driven product, and it's a relatively newer product, and it's something I'm really excited about. Like I said, I've been working on it for the last 5 years, and up on the screen are just some of the different things that we found. We've held focus groups, and when you talk to boomers, baby boomers, what you find is that they're really interested when they're making a housing choice, assuming they don't need higher levels of care. They're really interested in 3 things in there, in these 3 bubbles here. A community of like-minded people. What does that mean? It's a fancy way of saying they want to be around other people that are at their same life stage. They look to where they live for an outlet for activities and hobbies. Younger folks, when they move into an apartment, they're not necessarily looking to their landlord to fulfill the need for, hey, if I'm 25 years old, I'm not looking for the guy who owns my building to come up with activities and hobbies for me necessarily. But older folks that are retiring, downsizing, they do. And also, of course, maintenance-free and stress-free living. It's important to folks living on a fixed income that they can be able to predict and rely upon consistent outflow of money. Just a couple of the other things on this page. The top right, even though the numbers are very small, folks know that the demographic that we call the baby boom, that demographic, they call it the pig moving through the snake. 10,000 people turn 65 every day in America. And there's almost no purpose-built housing for the younger senior. Plenty of purpose-built housing for the more frail senior, the senior that needs help with activities of daily living, things like assisted living, independent living. But there's very little purpose-built, active adult, age-restricted housing, which is what we believe is perfect for this community. The next slide, so why Noblesville, why Hamilton County? So Joe and I travel the country looking for sites just like this. Hamilton Town Center, and in particular, Hamilton County, it's a pathway of growth community outside of a major metropolitan area. So we love to start with big cities. We have what we call an NFL city strategy, metropolitan statistical area that is large enough to have an NFL team. It's arbitrary, but it's a cutoff point that our investors like and that we believe in. And then within that metropolitan area, we love Hamilton County. It's got a great combination of affluence, density, wealth, and growth. Those are 4 demographics that we look for. And just to pick one to highlight, that last one, growth. So the United States, total population growing at 0.7, Indianapolis at 1%. These are annual growth rate numbers, and Hamilton County at 2.1%. So we're growing over twice Indianapolis even in Hamilton County. And more specific to what we're looking for here and why we love this area for seniors, the 65 plus, there's been an explosion in 65 plus population in Hamilton County, which obviously is good. We have a strategy. You want to skate to where the puck is going to be, right? So we're not looking for where is things good right now, where are they going to be good, and we're lucky enough to have found this particular site. And everyone has been to Hamilton Town Center. We've spent a lot of time there. I live in Atlanta. Joe lives in Philadelphia. But things like this combination of great tenant base, access to the highway, access to other senior-friendly things, hospitals, other types of seniors housing. You don't find this very often, and so we're super excited about this. This is just to pick a couple things. You've got the IMAX Theater. We're going to be, you can't really see it, but we're going to be directly across from the theater. We'll be walkable to this promenade, wonderful promenade center. There's food. There's of course the Ruoff Music Center is right there. And like I said, density, affluence, wealth, and growth, and the perfect location for a senior housing community. I'm going to turn it over now to Brad to just briefly discuss the site plan.
Good evening. Brad Shiragi, American Structure Point, offices at 9025 River Road, Indianapolis. As noted, this is in the Saxon area, directly adjacent to Hamilton Center. So if you're looking at the map here, Duluth exists right here on the south side of the site. They have a little stormwater pond here that will be expanded to provide stormwater quality for the site. So Duluth sits here, Harold Parkway is here, the new retail center that's currently being constructed is right over here on the catty corner northwest to our site. And then Cabela Parkway runs right here, obviously, with Cabela's here southwest of our site. And then this right here is the border of Hamilton Center. This road runs right into Hamilton Town Center right here. So the project is still currently being designed and running through your review process. However, it is a square-shaped building, interior courtyard for amenity space, and then parking and parking garages around the perimeter of the site. There is also a dog park proposed here on the south side of the site, as well as a small maintenance building. But really the focus is right there in the middle. You would come in off of Harold Parkway. There's also a secondary access point here on the southwest corner of the site, and that would sit off of the drive that comes into Duluth and would be extended north to Harold Parkway. So there'd be a connection here, and then our tie into our site would be here, and then also here on the north side of Harold Parkway. And I believe, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Yeah, just a couple slides. We don't necessarily need to go through them. Maybe while these pictures are up, I could open it up to questions, any reactions or questions that anyone on the team could offer. We've got pictures of the facade. We've got a couple images. Lost my focus. Oh, there we go. But this is very typical. It is a 4-story building, like Brad said. This has been designed, and we have a prototype that this looks pretty much like it. I wouldn't focus too much on the color of the brick or the color of the white facade, but this is the basic idea, and wanted to just see if there were questions around that. Some of the interior amenities, please. Mr. Johnson.
The active living part, besides the pool, what do we have?
Well, as Brad mentioned, there's a dog park. There are some exterior amenities that we're showing here. There'll be a great outdoor grilling area inside the clubhouse. When you walk in, there'll be a welcome and leasing area. Right when you walk in, a bistro area. There'll be a fitness center, usually a theater/media room, usually a craft room. Those are the interior amenity spaces. There's a multi-purpose room right when you walk in. I like to call it, the best visual I can give is like a Delta Sky Club, where you kind of walk in, there's multiple different types of seating. There's high seating and low seating, soft seating, there's TVs around, there's coffee area, that kind of thing.
But as far as activity itself, there's no
Well, they do
tennis courts, pickleball courts, anything like that?
I don't know that there's going to be room there for that. Possibly a pickleball court. If there was going to be any of those things on the south side by the dog park, we might be able to fit that. I mean, listen, we all love, it's the fastest growing sport in America. We'd love to be able to fit something like that, and maybe bocce, something like that.
A pickleball court would never make it.
Oh, yeah. You need more than one?
Yeah, here you'd probably need 10 or more, but.
I gotcha, yeah. Well, plenty of land there. Maybe we can
Buy the
convince.
lot next door.
Yeah.
So, quick question, our favorite topic, parking.
Yeah.
With this particular demographic, my fear would be the residential garages would be used as storage units. So do you have any way to manage that? Because you're 1.2 parking spaces over the minimum. Do we have any way to manage that? And then the second question would be, also this demographic will have a lot of visitors on Saturday and Sunday. It's retail around you. There isn't really a way to do reciprocating parking. I just have a concern about the parking.
And it's fair concern. Joe, did you want to maybe take that one?
It's a great question, and it's a changing answer based on what's happening in the country. First of all, a typical apartment, I think, is about 1.5 parking spaces per unit. That's been figured out by the International Transportation Experts, the ITE, as a legitimate parking ratio. This community of 172 units will be primarily single people in the community. So there's been figured out by the ITE that 1.25 to 1.3 is appropriate. For the future, with driverless cars and all the things we hear about in a 5 to 10 year window, we're probably overparked for something 10 years from now, with cars running up to the porte cochere and taking people where they want to go. So I don't think that I think we're appropriately parked now, 1.3, slightly more than maybe a national average for active living, and certainly under a multi-age community. But we're comfortable with the parking as it is. And we can, if this council thinks our application is worthy, we would get parking comparables for you to show you that we think we are appropriately parked.
I think part of that question is what probably the most important is, we show that, or we've had projects where the parking garages, we count them as parking, but they don't get used for parking. So then we end up with people parking on curbs and wherever they can find spots. So I don't know if we've done anything to change that or not, but we had a major problem with it about a year ago, so.
And I've seen that as a problem in other communities. You know, we have a national operator that we can have a conversation with about that. You know, I've seen that problem where folks are willing to pay for the parking and then they park their car on one of the surface parkings and then they, like you said, use it as a storage bin. It's not good. So it's something that we'll definitely address.
Any other questions? Comments? Concerns? Issues?
President. So this community, if I understood you correctly, is strictly for those who are independent living. And I think I just heard you say that primarily there'll be singles in these apartments, so that as people are maturing, they'll then have to move to a different community if they need assisted living or memory care or other things. Is that correct?
It is a great question. And you got into the heart of what the industry is facing right now, which is when you purpose-build something for one specific purpose, for example, age-restricted housing, where you're not bundling in inside the rent food, housekeeping, transportation, or care or help. You're allowing more people that can afford that, and then as they need those additional things, they either have to make a decision to move into a much more expensive house at a type of community, maybe when they don't need all of that service, but it's kind of I'm paying $2,000 or I'm paying $5,000. The beauty of active living is it keeps that fixed amount low, and then as you need additional care, maybe it begins with I only need 1 hour a day of additional care, something to help me in the morning to get dressed, get bathed, but I don't need to move into an assisted living facility yet. So what this gives is an optionality to the customer. That's the idea behind active living is I don't yet need all of that care. There are home health agencies and so forth that can be brought in. That wouldn't be something that the landlord would provide. That would be something that they would get from the community.
My mother-in-law lives in McCordsville in a senior living community that has cottages, independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So that's a product generally for the frail senior who needs help with activities of daily living, bathing, grooming, dressing, transportation, and they want to have access to health care. The beauty of this site is that community, the Enclave, is already built on the other side of 69, adjacent to two hospitals, St. Vincent's and IE, whatever.
IU.
IU. So you have two healthcare facilities already in place. They were built there for a reason. They knew seniors were coming here or seniors were already here. You have an independent living / assisted living community run by Spectrum called the Enclave. So as far as a transition, these residents are very, very independent. They're 55 plus, probably average age at entry of 72. When they need more care or when they think they need to have access to care, the Enclave is nearby. And there's other communities to the west, certainly. So this is kind of a beautiful complex of Del Webb communities, senior living communities, and this community right in between is a separate niche that has not been addressed yet, but there are ways to transition from this community into one of the other ones nearby.
And can you share with us what the typical rent for one of these units is going to be?
If you took an average market rate apartment, it would be a slight premium to that. So I think they're generally around $2,000, $1,800 in this market. There would be a slight premium for the senior services that Mike alluded to before, slightly more amenities within the building, certainly catering to the seniors with programs. So a slight premium, 15, 20, 25% to a market rate unit based on the value of the programs that we'd be bringing in. And usually about 40% of what an independent living unit would cost at the Enclave. Anytime you see a community that is offering care and offering access to health care, they're generally $1,000, $2,000 higher than an active living apartment would be. So it'd be on the lower end of that senior living scale.
Okay. And then food's on top of that, if they want to participate.
They have a full self-contained kitchen, so the residents would be cooking every meal for themselves, whereas in independent living, you can buy into a meal program.
Mr. President, I think just to dovetail on Mr. Peterson's comments, we need to be assured that the garages will not be used as storage units because that did become a very problematic situation with another complex that's not too far from this location, and we don't want to have to go through the whole, well, we need more parking, and now we're going to have to get variances, we're going to have to tear up right away, and it's just not something that, at least as a councilman, I don't want to have to entertain that again. But at that point, we had to solve a problem, but I think if this is done correctly on the front end, then that won't be an issue, but parking's always seemingly a challenge.
It's a fair point, and I think within a residency agreement with a prospective resident, you can build in restrictions on using garages as a storage unit. I think that's one way to get around it. We do have a lot of surface parking on the site. We do want to provide that option for people who do want covered parking, and I think we can accomplish that with some kind of an agreement within the resident agreement itself.
Then one more follow-up is, I didn't look at your website, but I think I'll do that. I just want to look at some of the different elevations that you've built, but seemingly they're in a variety of different markets, so.
The importance of that comment is that, as Mike alluded to, we have a rendering. We'll work with, if you have an architectural review committee here, if there's something more indigenous to this town or something indigenous to Saxony, we'd be more than happy to design something that you're certainly proud of.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess as a follow-up, I think that's an ideal location from what you're looking at doing. the walkability to the town center, the movie theater, the restaurants, for a age restricted, is that what you use the term, age restricted? Unit, it's just an ideal location. I think there are a few issues that can be worked through, but I encourage you to go on.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, in response to that, I see one connector point. I think it would take at least 2 or 3 connector points to those.
Another comment, Mr. Peterson?
I realize I should say this for Plan Commission, but I really like the direction it's headed in as an architectural piece. It doesn't feel like a traditional senior home. It has a very modern texture to it. I like the direction it's headed in, and I like the interior courtyard for this demographic too. Did Mr. Schrage mention that all the stormwater is off-site, so we don't need to worry about a pond? They're going to expand the Cabela's pond, or the Duluth?
That's correct. The pond will be sitting here. The existing Duluth has a dry basin there that'll be expanded to a wet pond, but it'll be off-site.
Okay.
Any other comments? Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Miscellaneous number 1, council to consider 2020 appointments. Ms. Lees?
At your last meeting, you were notified that some of your current appointments' terms are expiring. In the memo, these are listed, the current appointees and the proposed appointees. One is a 4-year term on the Board of Zoning Appeals. James Hanlon has agreed to serve another 4 years. Mr. Peterson has been nominated to serve a 1-year term on the Plan Commission. You have 2 1-year terms to the Redevelopment Commission. Mike Field is going to step down from that. Mr. Taylor has agreed to serve, and Jack Martin is willing to serve another 1-year term. And a 3-year term on the Tree Board. Mr. Taylor is finishing up his appointment, and Jennifer Roberts has agreed to serve. So if these are agreeable for your consideration and approval.
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I would make a motion to approve miscellaneous number 1.
Second.
Council to consider 2020 appointments.
Can I second that one? Okay.
It's been moved and seconded for council to consider 2020 appointments. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. 7 with 1 abstention. Council consider introductory information for the comprehensive master plan. Ms. Reed?
Sorry, it's like I'm walking down the aisle by myself. Good evening. Just wanted to introduce you to the firm that we selected to do our Noblesville Comprehensive Plan update. That is being done by HWC, and we are represented tonight by Corey Daly, and everyone in this room should know Chris Ham by now. If you don't, you will before this is over, probably. But they're here tonight to present to you where we are with this revised, maybe, if we can get it pulled up on the screen. To let you know where we ended up with our previous process and where we are now. This is a full working draft, and so we're here for feedback. I believe everyone received an email with a link to a very lengthy document to review. As if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or Corey Daly. Thank you very much. Can you see?
They can see theirs, but we can't see it.
No, you can't see them?
Can't see anything.
I don't think it's you, Corey.
So you all can see your, no,
No,
nothing
there's
yet?
nothing on the
Okay.
monitor.
Bear with us for just a second. There.
That should be moved to the.
Oh, the projector? Won't stay on. Will it not turn on at all?
Well, it stays on 3 minutes, 3 seconds, and then turns off.
Says it's coming on. Now it should. Maybe.
Get this out of the way.
These fingers crossed.
What's in the writing today?
See, now its ejector just went off again.
Do you just want us to wing it and do a summary without saying anything?
Sure do.
Let me pass around this one.
Yes. Soft skill.
I'll draw pictures with my hands or something. Mr. President, council members, thank you for allowing us the time to talk. I've been asked to keep this brief, so I'm going to do my best, especially without having the graphics up on the screen. I'm here to present the first draft of the Noblesville Comprehensive Plan update. What I'd like to talk about this evening is basically three things. This is just going to be a brief overview introduction for you all. This is the start of a public review process. There's going to be a number of hearings and meetings, obviously, that will come after this for your consideration. The primary topic for this evening is new content that you'll see in the plan and what we're calling Phase 2. This has been a process that's been going on for a little over a year and a half, and I'd like to just briefly touch on some of the new content that you will see as you go through the plan. And then I'll very briefly talk about the next steps in the schedule. And I'm going to probably continually make reference to the images on my screen. I apologize for that in advance, even though I know you can't see them. It's just the way it works out. So as you jump into the plan, start to review this. Keep in mind that the plan is effectively set up in two different halves. The first half, or the first section, is kind of the introduction. It's the research, it's the data, it's the finding, and it's recommendations on specific topic areas. The second half of the plan, if you will, is really your action plan. It's got a large number of specific action items that are intended to address the recommendations in the first half of the plan. That's all common format. What you want to start to pay attention to as you go through this are the action items, and specifically the action steps, the policy, and the strategies that are in those action items. Action items take up quite a bit of the content of the plan. As you go through it, you'll notice that, but both halves of the plan are really designed to work together. I have this great slide with acknowledgements. You can't see it, but what I wanted to highlight is the number of individuals who have spent significant time, donated time to this plan process over the full length of the plan. As you go through the plan, you'll see that acknowledgements page. It's a robust list. It's great. Great activity, great involvement. What I want you also to keep in mind is that list doesn't include the hundreds of individual residents that have participated throughout the multiple public input processes that we've had through the planning process. Public open houses, public surveys. There is detail on all of that in the draft document as you review it. Very quickly, the activities that we've undertaken for public involvement in Phase 2, and keeping in mind this phase that I'm talking about right now really started late September and has led to where we're at today, going into consideration of adoption of the full plan in January. During that short amount of time, we've actually done quite a bit of public involvement. The public involvement in the first phase was really aimed at getting a guiding vision for the community, coming off of the heels of the previous comp plan process, and then kind of calibrating recommendations and things towards that vision. The second phase, the public involvement process, was really aimed at three specific topical areas, the three topical areas with new content that we've added since the previous portion of the plan was done. Those public involvement activities have included 2 public meetings, one of which occurred just before this presentation this evening, 3 steering committee meetings that were really aimed at specific content, and then individual stakeholder conversations with both individuals and groups of individuals that had ideas and wanted to give some feedback towards the plan. And as of December 9th, when this draft was publicly released for review, we've been able to collect public comments online through your city website. So where you go download the plan, you can also leave public comments, and we will collect those over the next month or so as people review this. And we'll have hopefully a really nice list of comments from people. And then also the adoption meetings are technically and officially part of the public process. So this is just introducing the content to you tonight. We'll have a series of additional meetings coming up in January and February that will be formal public hearings where you'll be able to receive comment and have some open discussion and dialogue about the plan. Very quickly, this plan is really the culmination of a large number of existing documents, other plans that have been done independent. One of the overarching goals of this update for your comprehensive plan was to take all of these disparate ideas and recommendations and kind of funnel them through a central conduit or a central channel. So you're going to see ideas and recommendations from things like your Noblesville Alternative Transportation Plan, the Noblesville Now Capital Improvements Plan, the housing study, the downtown study, the Parks and Rec Master Plan. So all of these documents have contributed significantly to the content in the comprehensive plan, and that's intentional. Most recently, the White River Vision Plan, you're going to see a little bit of content related to how you guys can move some of those ideas forward. So there are three new portions of content that I really wanted to just very briefly touch on. I'm going to keep this really brief because the graphics aren't there to support some of the content that I was going to talk about, but I'm going to quickly introduce them, and the key concepts or themes that I want everybody to be aware of as they start to review the plan and see how these relate. The three topical areas that I'm going to discuss right now is a new chapter on floodplains, which was actually pretty relevant given the context of some of the discussion that we had previous to this presentation. The future land use plan, which is really a very significant portion of the comp plan update that directs your policy for land use into the future, and also a future growth plan that really starts to look at how you grow as a community and where you can physically grow for new growth in your community. With the floodplains chapter, there's a couple of key takeaways. The floodplains chapter is really set up to help give you a list of best practices and recommendations for how you can better utilize the floodways, floodplains, flood areas within your community. It's basically set up on a three-tiered system, which we're currently in the draft are calling an opportunity area, a preservation area, and a rural area. And that's all mapped and overlaid on top of the existing map of your community. But within each one of those areas is a series of recommendations that we've worked with staff on to help you understand how you can better take advantage of the floodplains, floodways as an asset in your community. That could be recreational asset in certain areas. It could be some development opportunities. And there's certain areas where you just want that preservation and protection as a natural asset for the community. So keep that in mind as you go through that chapter. There was a really nice graphic in here that I was going to show you that kind of highlights how that content is presented, but just know that each one of those sections is mapped and relates directly to how you use those areas moving forward. So a couple of key goals that I've kind of already touched on with the floodplains, again, kind of themes, allowing and encouraging what we call context-appropriate future development within certain portions of your flood zones. That's defined, obviously, in more detail in the chapter, but just know that there are opportunities within your current flood zone areas where you may have some opportunity for some, what we would call more intensive uses. It doesn't necessarily mean high-intensity development, but different ideas are outlined within that chapter. I think more importantly is actually utilizing your floodways and flood zones and your riparian corridors and your water assets as a destination, as an opportunity for people to come and engage more with those natural assets, whether it's recreational or just passive type uses, but allowing people better access to the floodways and floodplains and those natural assets that you have in your community, but also using them as linear corridors to make connections, critical connections within your community. So actually, again, looking at those areas as an asset and not necessarily something to be avoided at all costs. And then there are some recommendations working with engineering that we came up with on how you could utilize best management practices in other infrastructure projects to help protect and preserve certain aspects of the floodplains, floodways, and flood zones in your water bodies, because they are an important natural asset and a natural feature that need to be protected and preserved for the long-term prosperity of the community. Excuse me while I take a quick drink. So moving on, from floodplains, the future land use section is really one of the biggest sections that, of new content that you'll be able to see if you've had the opportunity to review early forms of this draft previously. There were three things that we tried to keep in mind, and three objectives, if you will, as we were developing the future land use policy with staff and with the stakeholders. The first objective we try to adhere to is providing more flexibility for development and your decision-making process, while also preserving the desired physical character of the community. So it's really looking at the physical form and not just the land use, not just the underlying use. So that flexibility in decision-making is really important. Leaning towards more form-based policies, it's kind of a modern practice in land use planning and land use policy, but actually looking at how the form and the function of a development adheres to your vision for what you want to see in your community now and into the future. And then last but not least, one of those key objectives that we use to try to calibrate some of the recommendations in the land use plan is providing a system that once you guys implement it and once people learn about it, is actually going to make your process, your review process and your negotiation process more transparent and more predictable. And we hear that all the time in a lot of different communities where, people with an interest in a project want to know what the playing field looks like coming in, and you will have an opportunity to let people know up front what the expectation is. So hopefully it helps streamline the process for you all and the decision-making tools. With that, we developed a future land use approach for your community that has three main components, and each of these components are designed to take a look at a different aspect of land use independently, but they're designed to work together to help layer in a little bit more understanding of how the land should be used or what your desires are for land use moving forward. The first one is the traditional land use, if you will. That's really just the desired relationship and the type of use that you'd like to see and where it is within your community. That's that traditional future land use map that we're all used to seeing through various forms of planning process. The second you'll see is actually a map and some content based around built form. Built form is really kind of an underlying factor with land use, and it really is looks at the desired scale, the intensity, and the character of the land use, and what you guys want to see in relation to those aspects of it. So you have the actual use, and then you have the different scale, intensity, and form in that built form map. And last but not least are the corridors and gateways. And corridors and gateways are obviously very, very important connectors from disparate points in your community and among different aspects of how you use your land. So those corridors have been given different classifications beyond just the thoroughfare plan, so you can start to look at the intensity of development and the types of development along key corridors. And when we talk about the corridors, we're also not just roadway corridors, but also trail corridors, because that alternative transportation component moving into the future is, as you well know, critically important for you. And then the gateways obviously give you an opportunity, along with the corridors, to provide a consistent character and branding throughout your community, no matter where you're at. That's through design standards, that's through development intensity, that's through land form and land use. Excuse me, the future land use map has been updated. We've spent a significant amount of time looking over the previous land use map. We've had a number of revision rounds with staff and with stakeholders and with the committee on that future land use map. So what you see is an updated version of that. You will also see, as I've alluded to, the built form map, which is designed to work with the future land use map. It actually looks at that character and that intensity. And then you'll see corridors and gateways covered in more detail as well. So a couple of goals, overarching goals that to keep in mind as you review the future land use plan and the future land use policy. And again, I'm trying to distill, 20 or 30 pages of content down into about 5 minutes of conversation. So there's a lot more detail in the plan. But there's a focus in this version on quality development patterns and not necessarily just the quantity of development in your community. So taking a look at the form that those developments take, how they interact with other related developments, what actually happens within a certain land use and how those bits and pieces and components are tied together. So you're talking about development pattern and quality patterns, not just the quality. Looking at context-sensitive development approach. So again, kind of like I described, how does one parcel of land interact with other parcels surrounding it, and how does that connect to the larger community? What types of services, what types of amenities, what types of uses are within that certain area? And then there's something that we heard a lot about, and hopefully it's reflected well in the future land use plan, is finding a way to encourage a consistently unique Noblesville character throughout your entire community. So that's one of the reasons that we're starting to direct towards form and function of a land use as opposed to just the specific use, because there's been a lot of discussion as you guys continue to grow physically, how these areas of the community that are further away from your traditional historic central core still say Noblesville, still elude that quality and that character that you guys know and love in your community. So that's a big challenge, but that comes through some of these different tools and these approaches that we've defined. And then finally, encouraging walkability and bikeability and a mix of uses within the neighborhood context. And you'll see that probably most directly related through activity centers that you'll see as part of the land use plan. But it's trying to understand and layer in a context of how you can offer neighborhood level services within a certain development pattern or development form to help meet the daily needs of people without having to go to the more regional centers that you're typically seeing. It's not intended to compete with the regional centers because that's not really going to occur, but it's to allow for the daily needs of people within their immediate living area. And it really alludes back to the walkability and the bikeability and how easy it is for people to do what they do without having to get into the car and drive somewhere. So the final section that I wanted to talk about, and this is going to be a bit of a challenge without the graphics, but is the predicted future growth of your community. So what we've proposed is a balanced approach, an approach of infill and redevelopment where it makes sense in your community, and we've mapped that and analyzed it, provided recommendations, but also an area of new growth or areas of new growth. I have a graphic here that shows the predicted future population growth as a percentage within your community, and there's really two big hotspots. One is the southeast corner, close to corporate campus, close to I-69, and going into Wayne Township, and one is kind of the southwest corner of your community, close to Hazeldale in that area where you guys know, you see the proposals, you see the growth. That's really where it's projected to continue to grow. In our opinion, and what we've been finding is the highest level of projected growth is going to be closer to where the land's available, obviously, which is going to be your southeast corner and east of the current community. And there's a nice graphic and description in the plan related to that. When it comes to the strategic approach, you'll actually see a map where we've taken the time to take a look at where it makes the most sense based on feedback that we've received and the direction that we've gotten from the committees and staff on where you can best invite or encourage infill development, redevelopment, new development, and also where you may want to just consider not having development at all. So preserving the character that you've got, whether it's a rural character. There's a lot of different influencing factors that weigh into this map and the decisions in this map, but it's something to keep in mind as you take a look and review that, and we'd love to have comments back on that. Last but not least, the highest area for new growth opportunity is effectively the eastern side of Noblesville within Wayne Township and Fall Creek Township. You guys have already placed significant investment out there with utilities and roadway infrastructure, and you've seen a lot of development and a lot of positive things take place out there through your corporate campus and Saxony and all the things that are occurring out there. We're anticipating, and it is anticipated, that that's going to continue to be propelled into the future. So what you'll see is a future growth recommendation that's basically three-tiered. The first tier is what we're terming the immediate term. It's the area that's under the highest immediate pressure for development and growth. And that's really kind of bordering on the eastern side of your community into Wayne Township. But it's more specifically, it's south of State Road 38 and north of State Road 69. So that southern third of Wayne Township in your eastern jurisdiction. The second area, we're calling it medium term. So we haven't actually put years to this because we can't predict at that level with that level of certainty, but the medium term is the area that is most likely to wait a while before you see significant pressure. As you see more infrastructure investment and things like that, you may start to see more land being proposed for development, but that's really that kind of middle third through Wayne Township between 32 and 38. So that kind of pie-shaped wedge that comes into your downtown from the east. And then last but not least, in your new growth opportunity areas is the long-term, and effectively is an area that is, for all intents and purposes, probably going to be preserved as rural or agricultural in character and nature, similar to the way it is now for an indefinite period of time. Now, we all know that circumstances can change, but given this point in time, this is the way we see it kind of mapping out. And this is actually, as we talk to different stakeholders and different people in the committees, this was, this type of growth plan was actually fairly well received in terms of that tiered approach and understanding the length of time where you can expect things to occur. With that, there's a couple of key goals or underlying themes with the future growth that I wanted you guys to be aware of, and these really relate to future land use and everything that you'll see in the plan. I hope you see that repeated throughout the plan. One is using the future land use policy that's defined in your plan for the new growth areas. So what you've got is you're going to have areas where you're going to need to consider annexation or bringing new land into the community to apply the future land use policies in your comp plan as this is adopted to those areas over time. Second is making sure that you maintain a very strong sense of place and identity with Noblesville as you start to grow, as you continue to grow, as you have that physical growth outward, which will happen, but you're going to have to really work and in some ways it will likely be a struggle to make sure that you maintain that identity with those parts of the community as Noblesville. Third is continuing to develop out the corporate campus as a regional economic destination. Obviously, it has a tremendous amount of momentum out there, and there's a lot of opportunity remaining. And then maintaining that unique Noblesville character that I've already talked about, and that ties with item number 2 that I just mentioned. And finally, providing the unique amenities and attractions that people are asking for. That's trails, that's parks, that's pickleball, depending on your demographic. There's all kinds of things that come into that. But those amenities and attractions as new development comes in and as you have that growth are going to be important to consider. So with that being said, I'm on my final slide here, which is the next steps. I just wanted to very quickly give you an overview of what we're planning for schedule. So the public comments, as I mentioned earlier, started on December 9th, and we'll plan to keep those open through early to mid-January, depending on the timeline that you'd like us to keep those open. That draft is going to be available. We want to collect as many comments as we can, obviously, at this point. After that, January 21st, we're intending to go to the Plan Commission for the first formal adoption hearing on this. So obviously, public comments will be open, and then you have that public hearing. And then we're intending to come back here on January 28th for your first official hearing for adoption of the plan, assuming Plan Commission has favorable recommendations. And then we're hoping to come back sometime in February for you guys to have a second reading of the plan. So there's 3 or 4 key points coming up moving forward. So there's still going to be a significant amount of opportunity to provide comment and feedback on this as we move forward. So thank you for your patience with no visual aids. I did my best to get through it, but I'm happy to answer questions that you may have, comments that you may have now.
Is that presentation going to be shared with council? Can you share it with Sarah that she can then share?
Yes, I've got digital copies I can hand off right now. So.
We're going to get everyone a hard copy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. It's much better with the graphics.
Mr. Jensen.
Corey, thank you. I know that was a tedious process there, but I think one of the most important things that as we look to expand our city's boundaries to the east, I think it's essential that we have a game plan in place for land use around the city. I think we need to continue to be, as was referenced earlier, proactive in our development and know what we want where. And so I think this is a very important, crucial step. I look forward to future council adopting this in 2020. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'd like to expand on that. We need to be proactive with our infrastructure along with our future development.
Heard that a time or two, Mr. Air, yes.
Yeah, great job. I mean, any of us that have ever done a presentation and lost our PowerPoint, you didn't even break a sweat.
Thank you. Well, it's a little, no, thank you, I appreciate you saying so.
Everybody was envisioning all the slides we were saying.
Yeah, I see them enough, I know what they look like, it's,
Been in that spot, I appreciate the going through the process and what you're talking about, because we tend to kind of look at the pictures, and I appreciated it, hearing what you're talking about. The only concern I have is the condensed time period. And this is normally a year and a half long process, just to make sure that we get good community support, outreach, and again, I don't want somebody to say this snuck up on us, so I'll be curious to see how many comments we get in the first round and what we're doing to generate.
yeah, and that's an important point, if I may, that we're dovetailing on to the tail end of a process that had already spanned 12 to 18 months plus. One of the reasons those previous planning documents are so important is because there was a public process involved with all of those as well. So we're taking those recommendations, so you're really stacking public on top of public on top of public. It's actually a really robust way to go about this, and it's stretched out over a significant amount of time, but I'm definitely cognizant of that too. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Mr. President, I would just say that this is really a key component of where we're headed for the next 10 to 15, 20 years. And I don't, to Mr. Peterson's point, I don't want to rush into it, but there is a sense of urgency to get this in place so that we've got a roadmap. So I would just be encouraging to the council to take some time and read through this plan. It's very robust. I mean, it'll make good holiday reading for you. While you're not working.
Have you seen it, Greg?
All 230 pages of it, but, you know, dog ear it, mark it. Because it's, and then we may want to, as a group, get together and discuss it before we actually start to have, you know, do this in a public meeting setting, because it's what you're basing all your future development on. So I'm just putting that out there for our thoughts here going into 2020, because it's going to take a little energy to get through all of it and make sure that we're comfortable with the plan.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Reed, is your next step, are you going in front of the Planning Commission in January? Is that the next step?
Yes, we're actually, right now, that's like electrocuted. I'm not touching it. We will actually be gathering more public input and then going to Plan Commission January. I think 21st is the date. We will get everyone a hard copy. We've also talked internally, if it's hard for me to read this 230-page document, that's my job. This is what I like to do. So if it's hard for me to read that, it's going to be extremely hard for everyone to read it. So what we'd like to do is use this as more of the bigger picture behind the scenes and make a practitioner's guide, something much smaller, easily condensed, that you can see, you know, the maps and the meat and potatoes that you need to see in order to get a development done. I'm sure Mr. Corby Thompson in the audience will read this entire thing and have it memorized by January 1st, for sure. But just want to make sure everyone's aware that it won't be this scary moving forward. We're going to simplify it a little bit. And we do have additional items for study that HWC is under contract for within January. We're going to look more at a floodplain study and some additional infill toolkits. So this is the big piece that has to get adopted, is preferably in February, and then we'll keep moving forward. So this won't be the last time you hear about this document and the additional items that come after that.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Any other questions?
Yeah, real quick, Mr. President. How are you what's the process for gathering the public input?
We've had a steering committee, we've had a couple of sub-area groups that we've worked with, as well as one-on-one information. We've met with the county planning department, we've met with the Wayne Township trustee. I'm
talking general residents, public. Is there any?
General residences. We've had several public open houses, haven't got a lot of feedback. Most of it, I would say, was done in the beginning portion. There aren't a whole lot of new sections other than the land use, which in all honesty is really the most important part. But right now, we're doing a public push online with those comments that are going to come in and go directly to Caleb and Corey. So we'll report back on what we get on that. So if anyone asks about this process, please feel free to share that website that you were sent that link to as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I just want to just reiterate, because I think it's been brought up several times, that this is a continuation of a years-long process involving years of public input. This is a final phase of this overall comprehensive master plan.
Yes, and all of the public input, and we had individual steering committees. I think everyone on this council has served on at least one of those in the past process. So all of that is documented and in this extremely detailed book that you all will receive. Hopefully, we're hoping by Friday to have them all in your mailboxes. So happy reading over the holidays, Mr. O'Connor.
Read the books.
Yes, thank you.
Moving on, transfer number 1, council to consider
Number 3.
Number 3.
I wrote it in the wrong spot. Gotta find my sheet.
There you go. Something like that. No?
It's not on that.
I know what you meant. Yeah.
It is. This here?
Miscellaneous number 3, council to consider resolution RC 20-19 in lieu of transfer TC-01-19 to reallocate local income tax revenue from the general fund to the motor vehicle highway fund to cover costs associated with Pleasant Street Design Phase 1.
Mr. Council, Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller. I'll try to make this as quick and painless as possible. First of all, I appreciate you adding this item to the agenda late. And really, it's kind of an artifact of an evolving discussion I've been having with the state, probably one of the most frivolous kind of bureaucratic debates I've been involved in, but it's just around, if you remember, a month or so ago, we did an additional appropriation to the MVH fund related to the Pleasant Street design work, and at the end of the day, the way that was to be funded was there was going to be a cash transfer resolution that you passed from the general fund to the MVH fund to help support that additional appropriation. Got into some discussions with the state about that, and basically got an answer today about their preference on how we proceed with this. And the simplest way that I can describe the discussion was, in essence, they basically said, okay, somebody's asked you to give change for a 20. You're allowed to do that, City of Noblesville, but you can't give a 10 and 2 5s. You can only give 2 10s. You know, it's that kind of crazy differentiation. So basically what this resolution does is it would give me the authority to, in lieu of transferring the cash from the previous, that was defined in the previous transfer, in lieu of transferring the cash from the general fund to the MVH fund, I can take our lit revenue that was going to the general fund and reallocate it to the MVH fund in the same dollar amount. So, and the state is okay with that, but not okay with the other approach. So that's the purpose of this. The reason why it came to you late was I got that answer this morning. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor.
I'll make a motion to approve miscellaneous number 3, council consider resolution RC-20-19, in lieu of transfer TC-01-19.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded for council to consider resolution RC 20-19, a resolution in lieu of transfer TC 01-19 to reallocate local income tax revenue from the general fund to the motor vehicle highway fund to cover the costs associated with Pleasant Street Design Phase 1. A hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 8-0.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to transfers. Council consider transfer TA-25-19, an appropriation transfer in the general fund to realign appropriation with expenditures for 2019. Mr. Barris?
Mr. President, council members, Sam Barris with Office of Finance and Accounting. I'll make this extremely brief. We have a couple transfer resolutions on the agenda tonight that deal with this sort of year-end budget cleanup process that at this point you're familiar with. This particular one deals with the general fund. All but one of these are under $50,000, so based on the resolution that council passed about a month ago, technically the council doesn't even need to approve those. We could have done those on our own, but since we're aware of them now, we're bringing them forward and just get them taken care of in advance. The one that's over $50,000 relates to legal fees that were under budgeted just due to a lack of historical information on how much those cost the city in total. I'm not going to get into the rest of them. There is an attachment where you can see what's being transferred. If anyone has specific questions on any one of those, happy to answer them now, or you can ask us after the fact and we'll get you an answer. So with that, that's all I got.
Any questions of Mr. Barris? Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, in the spirit of making one motion this year, I'd like to move to approve transfer TA 25-19, an appropriation transfer to the general fund to realign appropriations with expenditures for 2019.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-25-19, an appropriation transfer in the general fund to realign appropriations with expenditures for 2019. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor? Motion carries 8-0. Council to consider transfer TA-26-19, an appropriation transfer in the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, MVH Fund, to realign appropriations with expenditures for 2019. Mr. Barris?
Council members, again, this is a pretty technical budget cleanup transfer resolution, in this case dealing with the MVH fund within the street department. It's pretty straightforward in that $42,000 is being transferred from the services and other charges portion of their budget to the capital equipment portion of their budget. So no change between departments, all contained in the street department. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
I would make a motion that we approve transfer number 2 as presented. Transfer TA-26-19.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve transfer TA-26-19, an appropriation transfer in the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, MVH Fund, to realign appropriations with expenditures for 2019. This will be a hand vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. Motion carries 8-0. Thank you. We are almost done. Council comments. Do I have any? Well, if I don't have any from...
There's a couple of them.
Mr. Taylor.
I have a couple comments. Since this is my last council meeting this evening, I'd like to start off by thanking the citizens that supported me and put me in this seat. Mayor, it's been an honor to work with you and your staff. They were very easy to work with. I appreciate everything you've done for the city. Mr. Howard, thank you for your legal services. Clerk's Department, thank you. I appreciate it. Members of council, it's been awesome. Great group of people. Work hard for the city. Keep up the good work, and thank you for everything you do.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any other council comments? Mr. Johnson.
Well, this is my last meeting also, and can't say much better than what Mr. Taylor has said, but yeah, all the people that have been so kind and so generous with all their assistance here at the city, and particularly all the citizens of Noblesville who have been wonderful. And this place will always, no matter where I am, have a very special place in my heart. So, and thank you very much to particularly all the council people over the 12 years, gosh, that I've been doing this. It's been extremely rewarding, extremely rewarding. So thank you.
Mr. Jensen. I don't think you're going to be sitting there. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
I will echo the two of them in terms of the opportunity to serve in this body has been a true honor. I'm excited about the opportunity I have going forward. I would like to thank Mr. Taylor and Mr. Johnson for their service to the city of Noblesville. I know I speak on behalf of 65,000 grateful Millers in this city when I say thank you for your time and your talents that you've given to the city. And I know I join all of you in wishing you the best going forward. And for the current council members and the future council members sitting out there, I look forward to continuing to move Noblesville forward in 2020 in a new capacity.
Well, with that, we have a couple of presentations to make. If Mr. Taylor, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Jensen would come down and step in front of the podium.
Are we all going back up front?
Okay. Prepared for the picture.
Oh, no, we're not.
Johnson, we have for you and for Mr. Taylor, but not for Mr. Jensen. Your council chair to take with you to wherever you're going to be. And it's not a rocking chair, so you can't go to sleep. We also have this plaque dedicated towards your service and you serve the community, and we thank you very much. And we thank you for all your years of service. Mr. Jensen, we have a table lamp, a desk lamp that's going to go in your future office.
Make sure to turn it on.
And I can see the light from the house. But we do appreciate all your years of service, all you've done in the community. I don't think the community knows the number of hours that are put into this job. And you've all served it well. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other comments from any of the council?
Wait a minute, hold on, I hate to follow that, because you just can't follow that. But this also is the last meeting for President Ayer as the president of the city council. Of course, it's continued for another 4 years. So we have a plaque here to represent his 1 year, this last year, as the president of our city council. So, Mr. Ayer, thank you for your leadership and your guidance. You took us through some interesting roads this last year, and thank you very much for doing that.
I appreciate it, and with that, do I have a motion?
Second.
And move to adjourn, adjourned.